They said I'd never make it. I remember every sneer, every dismissive glance in that suffocating boardroom. The way they'd laugh when I presented my ideas, how they'd steal my work and call it theirs. "You'll never make it" became their favorite phrase, their daily reminder that I didn't belong. But what they didn't know was that every insult was fuel. Every humiliation was a match. And when the fire finally caught, it wasn't me who burned, it was their entire empire that turned to ash. My name is Alyssa Morgan, and I grew up believing in the American dream. 32 years of clawing my way up from the rust-eaten streets of Youngstown, Ohio, where abandoned steel mills stood like tombstones of better days. My father worked himself to death in those mills before they shuttered. My mother cleaned office buildings at night, her knees permanently stained with the grime of other people's success. They taught me that education and hard work were the only tickets out of that graveyard of broken promises. I was the first in my family to graduate college, summa cum laude, case Western Reserve, double major in finance and data analytics. I thought those credentials meant something. I thought they were armor against the world that had crushed my parents. How fucking naive. Stratton Dynamics recruited me straight from campus. Their glass tower in downtown Cleveland gleamed like a beacon of everything I'd worked for. 6 figures starting salary. Full benefits. A future that finally looked different from my past. The recruiter, all white teeth and firm handshakes, told me I was exactly what Stratton was looking for. Hungry, brilliant, diverse. That last word should have been my warning. The first day I walked into that building wearing my only designer suit, bought with my signing bonus, I felt invincible. The marble lobby, the panoramic views from the 40th floor, the hum of money being moved in millions with each keystroke. This was it. This was making it. But the honeymoon ended before lunch on day 1. "You must be the diversity hire," Rebecca Stanton said when I was introduced to my team. She said it with a smile that never reached her eyes, like she was commenting on the weather. Rebecca was everything I wasn't: blonde, connected. Her father golfed with half the board. She'd been promoted to department head at 28. Not because she was brilliant, but because she knew whose secrets to keep and whose backs to stab. The conference room where we held our morning meetings became my daily humiliation chamber. Every idea I presented was dissected not for its merit, but for sport. Victor Hale, our CEO, would lean back in his Italian leather chair, fingers steepled, and wait for me to finish before turning to Derek Cole or one of the other boys' club members and asking, "What do you think about what she just said?" As if my words needed translation from female to profitable. Derek was the worst. Harvard MBA, cocaine habit everyone pretended not to notice, and a wedding ring he forgot about after 6 p.m. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence, explain my own analyses back to me incorrectly, then take credit when my strategies worked. "Great implementation of Derek's vision," Victor would say in our quarterly reviews, while my name disappeared from every email chain that mattered. 3 months in, I found my first project proposal, the one I'd spent 60 hours perfecting, presented to the board under Rebecca's name. When I confronted her, she tilted her head like I was a confused child. "It's called collaboration, Alyssa. That's how teams work. Unless you're not a team player. Not a team player. The corporate kiss of death." By month 6, I wasn't invited to client dinners. By month 9, my office was moved to the corner by the service elevator. By year 1, I was ghosted from strategic meetings but somehow still responsible when things went wrong. "You need to be more assertive," HR told me when I filed my first complaint. "You need to be less aggressive," they said after I followed their advice. The morning I overheard them in the bathroom still burns in my memory. Rebecca's voice, casual and cruel. "How long do you think before she quits?" "I give her another 3 months. Tops." "She's tougher than she looks." Someone replied, "Doesn't matter. They never make it. Not her type. She can have all the degrees in the world, but this isn't about merit. Never was. She'll never make it here." That phrase, "You'll never make it," it became their inside joke, whispered just loud enough for me to hear, written between the lines of every performance review, coded into every reorganization that stripped away my responsibilities. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to slink back to Ohio, another casualty of their good old boys club. They wanted me to prove their theory right, that people like me, people who fought their way up from nothing, didn't belong in their marble tower, standing in that bathroom stall, listening to them laugh about my inevitable failure. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. The American dream I'd believed in was dead, had been dead long before I arrived. But something else was born in that moment. Something harder. Something patient. Something dangerous. The three of them formed an unholy trinity of corporate sadism, each with their own specialty in making my life hell. Victor Hale ruled from the top floor like a medieval lord. 63 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that came from owning a yacht. He'd inherited his position from his father-in-law, but acted like he'd built Stratton Dynamics from scratch. In meetings, he had this habit of removing his Patek Philippe watch and setting it on the table, a $200,000 reminder of who held the power. He never addressed me directly, always through intermediaries, as if I was too insignificant for his attention. But I saw how his eyes tracked me, the way a snake watches a mouse. Morgan's numbers are off again, he'd say in executive meetings, even when my projections were the only ones that proved accurate quarter after quarter. He'd assign me impossible deadlines, then schedule mandatory meetings during my work time, ensuring I'd fail. When I pulled all-nighters to meet his demands anyway, he'd change the requirements at the last minute. Flexibility is key in finance, he'd say with that practiced CEO smile. If you can't adapt, perhaps this isn't the right fit. Rebecca Stanton was subtler, more surgical in her cruelty. She weaponized feminism, claiming to mentor me while systematically destroying my credibility. "We women need to stick together," she'd say, then CC the entire department on emails highlighting my smallest errors. She'd schedule girl lunches where she'd spend an hour explaining why I wasn't ready for more responsibility, how I needed to pay my dues like she had. What dues? Her father had gotten her the job. Her biggest achievement was marrying a senator's son. She had this voice, sweet, concerned, maternal, that made her sabotage sound like guidance. "I'm only telling you this because I care," she'd preface, before informing me that people were saying I was difficult to work with, that my ambition was off-putting, that I should smile more, speak less, be grateful for the opportunity. She assigned me to data entry while giving my strategic planning projects to her favorites, then wondered aloud in performance reviews why I wasn't showing more initiative. But Derek Cole was personal in his hatred. Maybe because we'd started the same week. Maybe because I'd outscored him in every training assessment. Maybe because I'd laughed when he'd tried to explain derivatives to me incorrectly in my first week. He made it his mission to break me. Derek would schedule meetings in bars after hours, knowing I'd either have to attend and watch him get drunk and handsy, or miss out and be labeled not a culture fit. He'd accidentally leave me off email chains, then publicly berate me for being unprepared. He started rumors that I'd slept my way to the job, that I was sleeping with clients, that I wasn't sleeping with anyone, and that's why I was such a frigid bitch. The worst was the Monday morning meeting where he presented my risk assessment model, the one I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, the one that would save the company millions as his own. I sat there, watching him fumble through my equations, mispronouncing terms, butchering the logic, while everyone nodded and praised his innovation. When I spoke up, Victor cut me off. "Let's not get bogged down in who did what. We're a team here." A team? I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. They had a system, these three. Victor would create impossible situations. Rebecca would ensure I had no allies, and Derek would deliver the public humiliations. They were picking me apart. Piece by piece, death by 1,000 cuts. The Friday afternoon that changed everything started like any other. Another meeting where my ideas were ignored. Another email where my name was mysteriously dropped from a successful project. Another whispered, "She'll never make it," as I passed in the hallway. But this time, I didn't go home to my studio apartment to rage and cry and question everything. This time, I went to the archives. Stratton Dynamics kept 20 years of records in the basement. Financial documents, emails, board minutes, the corporate graveyard where truth went to die. Security was laughable. They never imagined someone like me would care about old paper. But I'd started to notice patterns. Projects that disappeared, employees who'd left suddenly, numbers that didn't quite add up. That night, in the fluorescent purgatory of the archive room, I found the first thread, a lawsuit, settled quietly. A former employee, a woman named Patricia Kimura, who'd filed a complaint eerily similar to mine. She'd left with a severance and an NDA. But NDAs couldn't hide everything, not if you knew where to look. Then I found another, and another. A pattern spanning 15 years. All women, all minorities, all brilliant, all destroyed by the same three names: Hale, Stanton, Cole. But the real discovery was in the financial records. Discrepancies hidden in subsidiary accounts. Client funds diverted through offshore shells. SEC violations buried under layers of legal restructuring. They weren't just bigots and bullies. They were criminals. And they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They'd given me access to all of it, thinking I was too broken, too beaten down to notice. Thinking I'd never make it long enough to matter. They were half right. I wouldn't make it, not in their world, not by their rules, but I would make something else entirely. Their downfall. The setup was perfect, almost artistic in its cruelty. A missing $2.3 million from the Morrison account. A discrepancy I'd flagged 3 weeks earlier in an email they'd ignored. Now, suddenly, it was a crisis. And somehow, mysteriously, my login credentials were the last ones on the system. "We're not saying you took it," Victor said, flanked by security in his office. Rebecca stood by the window, studying her manicure. Derek smirked from the corner. "But we need to investigate. You understand. Protocol." Protocol. Like anything about this was standard procedure. They suspended me, pending investigation, which we all knew meant fired without the legal liability. They escorted me out through the main lobby at lunch hour. Security guards boxing me in like a criminal. My personal items in a cardboard box. Maximum humiliation. I heard Derek laugh as the elevator doors closed. My keycard deactivated. My corporate email erased. 5 years of work. Gone. They even contested my unemployment claim, citing suspected gross misconduct. The investigation would drag on for months, they said. Just long enough to destroy my reputation, ensure I'd never work in finance again. I sat in my apartment, the one I could no longer afford, and stared at the walls. My savings would last 3 months, maybe 4 if I lived on ramen. My mother called, excited to hear about her successful daughter in the big city. I couldn't bring myself to answer. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. 30 days to vacate. The same day. Marcus, the one person I'd thought cared about me, sent a text. "This isn't working out. Too much drama with your job situation. Sorry." 2 lines of text to end a 2-year relationship. He'd been fucking Rebecca's assistant. I found out from Instagram. Rock bottom has a specific sound. It's the echo of your footsteps in an empty apartment. Boxes packed with a life that no longer exists. It's the silence of a phone that doesn't ring with job callbacks. It's your mother's voice breaking when you finally tell her you're moving back home. But rock bottom is also where you find the bones of who you really are. I wasn't going back to Ohio. Not yet. Not defeated. I started visiting the public library, using their computers to dig deeper. The investigation into me was a sham, but it gave me the perfect cover. Who'd suspect a disgraced employee of conducting her own investigation? I reached out to Patricia Kimura, the woman from the archives, then to others. Maria Rodriguez, Keisha Williams, Lila Patel. Each with the same story, the same 3 names, the same systematic destruction. They did it to me too, Patricia said over coffee in a diner outside the city. But I took the money and ran. Signed their NDA. Let them win. "What if you hadn't?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "Then they would have destroyed me completely. Like they're doing to you." They've already destroyed me, I said, which means I've got nothing left to lose. That's when she slid a flash drive across the table. I kept copies, everything. I was too scared to use it. But maybe you're not. The drive contained emails, recordings, documents. Patricia had been building a case for 2 years before they broke her. But she'd never had access to what I'd found in the archives. Together, our evidence painted a picture of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and discrimination that would make Enron look like a parking violation. I started reaching out to the others. Most were too scared, too traumatized, bound by NDAs. But some were angry enough to talk. We met in secret, in diners and parking lots and public parks. The invisible army of the destroyed, comparing notes, sharing evidence, building a case. My unemployment ran out. I sold everything, my jewelry, my designer clothes, the furniture I'd bought when I thought I was building a life. I moved into a weekly motel, the kind where you don't ask questions about your neighbor's screams. I lived on instant coffee and spite. Derek posted photos from his promotion party on LinkedIn. Thrilled to announce my new position as senior vice president, Rebecca commented. So deserved. Stratton Dynamics values talent. Victor was quoted in the Financial Times about the importance of maintaining high standards in hiring. I screenshot everything, every boast, every lie, every public display of their success built on our bones. Evidence of their arrogance, their certainty that they'd won. My laptop became my weapon. I taught myself forensic accounting, digital investigation, the art of following money through its laundering cycles. I mapped their entire network, who they paid off, who they partied with, who knew their secrets, and kept quiet. The corruption went deeper than I'd imagined, tentacles reaching into regulatory bodies, law firms, even law enforcement. You look different, my mother said during one of our rare video calls. Harder. She was right. The optimistic girl from Youngstown was dead. They'd killed her in that boardroom, buried her in that archives room, cremated her remains when they escorted her out like a criminal. What remained was someone else. Someone who understood that the American dream wasn't about working hard and playing fair. It was about power. And those who had it would do anything to keep it. But power, I was learning, had vulnerabilities. Every fortress has a weak stone. Every king has enemies. Every empire built on lies can be brought down by truth, if you know how to weaponize it. The night I found the offshore account in the Caymans, the one with Derek's name on it, the one skimming from client funds, I didn't celebrate. I just added it to the file that grew larger every day, fed by insomnia and rage and the absolute certainty that their day would come. You'll never make it, they'd said. They were right. I'd never make it in their world. I was going to burn it down instead. The transformation wasn't sudden. You don't wake up one day knowing how to destroy an empire. You learn it transaction by transaction, secret by secret, ally by ally. Patricia's evidence was the primer, but I needed more. Current intel. Real-time access. That's when I found Jimmy Tran, a burnt-out IT contractor Stratton had screwed over on a 6-figure project. They'd refused to pay, citing substandard work, then used his system anyway. He lived in the same shithole motel, 2 doors down. We bonded over cheap whiskey and expensive grudges. You want to hack them? He asked, laughing bitterly. That's a federal crime. I want to expose what's already there, I corrected. That's journalism. He taught me about digital footprints, metadata, the breadcrumbs every email leaves behind. In exchange, I showed him the financial trails, how Stratton had stolen from dozens of contractors like him. We worked in his room, surrounded by servers he'd salvaged from dumpsters, building our digital arsenal. Maria Rodriguez brought the international connections. She'd been Victor's translator before he fired her for refusing his advances. But she'd kept recordings of his calls with offshore bankers, conversations in Spanish he thought she was too stupid to understand. Every bribe, every kickback, every SEC violation carefully documented in her near-perfect memory and backed up on encrypted drives. Keisha Williams had the political dirt. She'd been Rebecca's chief of staff before Rebecca threw her under the bus for a failed campaign donation scandal. Keisha knew where the bodies were buried, literally, in one case, involving a dead sex worker at a senator's fundraiser that Stratton had helped cover up. We called ourselves the Forgotten, those erased from Stratton's success story, the ones they thought they'd buried. We met weekly in a storage unit Lila Patel rented under a fake name. Our war room wallpapered with financial documents, organizational charts, timelines of crime. The plan crystallized slowly. We couldn't just dump everything online. They had lawyers who'd bury it, PR firms who'd spin it, journalists on payroll who'd ignore it. We needed precision, timing, maximum impact. Think of it like a controlled demolition, Jimmy explained, pulling up building schematics on his laptop. You don't blow random holes. You target the support structures, the right pressure points, in the right sequence, and the whole thing comes down clean. Our support structures had names: Victor Hale, Rebecca Stanton, Derek Cole. I studied them like a hunter studies prey. Victor's weakness was arrogance. He believed his own myth. Never imagined someone like me could touch him. Rebecca's was vanity, her carefully curated image, her political aspirations, her need to be seen as a feminist icon while destroying other women. Derek's was simple greed mixed with stupidity. He took risks the others wouldn't, left sloppier trails. The Cayman account was just the beginning. Derek was also selling insider information to competitors, using a crypto wallet he thought was untraceable. Jimmy traced it in 3 days. The idiot had used his corporate laptop. Rebecca's feminist foundation was a front, funneling money to her husband's campaigns while writing off administrative costs that funded her Hermes addiction. The receipts were all there, hidden in subsidiary filings she thought no one would read. Victor was the careful one. But careful men often have the biggest secrets. It took months, but we found it. A second set of books dating back 15 years, showing the real Stratton dynamics. Client funds diverted, pension accounts drained, securities fraud that made Bernie Madoff look amateur. All bearing his digital signature, his authorization codes, his fingerprints on every crime. But evidence wasn't enough. We needed a delivery system that would bypass their defenses, hit them where they couldn't spin or suppress. That's when Aisha Sharma entered the picture. Aisha was a financial journalist at the Wall Street Journal, young, hungry, tired of puff pieces about IPOs. Patricia knew her from college. We fed her crumbs at first, testing her integrity, her courage. She bit hard, wanted more. This is Pulitzer material, she breathed, scrolling through our files in that storage unit. Holy shit, this is career-defining. It's also dangerous, I warned. They have reach, they have resources. They also have enemies, she countered. You're not the only ones they've hurt. Give me 2 months. Let me build corroborating sources, get legal protection, line up simultaneous publication across multiple outlets. They can't sue everyone. 2 months. It felt like a lifetime when you're living on rage and ramen. When every day they walked free was another insult. But revenge, I was learning, was a dish that required precise temperature control. Too hot, and you burn it. Too cold, and it has no impact. So I waited. We all waited. And while we waited, we kept building. More evidence, more allies. A former SEC investigator who'd been pressured to drop a case against Stratton. A congressman who'd lost his seat after refusing to play ball. A federal prosecutor who'd been watching them for years but never had enough evidence to move. The night before Aisha's story was set to publish, I stood outside Stratton Dynamics, looking up at the glass tower that had once represented everything I'd wanted. The lights were still on in Victor's office. Rebecca's Tesla was in the executive lot. Derek was probably at his desk, cooking books he thought were untouchable. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to a different world, one where their crimes were front-page news, where their phones wouldn't stop ringing, where the FBI would be at their doors with warrants. You'll never make it, they'd told me. They were wrong. I'd made something they never expected. I'd made them vulnerable. The web was intricate, each strand carefully placed over months of 18-hour days fueled by gas station coffee and pure vindication. We didn't just want to expose them, we wanted to trap them. Leave them no room to maneuver, no story to spin, no escape route to exploit. Jimmy had built us a digital command center in the storage unit. Multiple monitors showed real-time data, Stratton's stock price, social media mentions, news alerts. We tracked their every move through publicly available information and the occasional gray area reconnaissance. It's not hacking if it's on their public LinkedIn, Jimmy would say, screenshotting Derek's bourbon-fueled 2 a.m. posts about crushing the competition and survival of the fittest. Every post was evidence of the culture, the arrogance, the complete lack of awareness that their empire was already crumbling from within. The financial web was my masterpiece. 23 shell companies across 7 jurisdictions, all leading back to 3 names. I'd mapped every transaction, every wire transfer, every phantom invoice. The FBI would need forensic accountants to understand it all, but I'd created a roadmap so clear a first-year analyst could follow it. Victor's biggest vulnerability was his ego-driven sloppiness. He'd been stealing for so long, he'd gotten lazy. Signatures on documents he'd never read. Authorizations for accounts he'd forgotten existed. A paper trail of criminal negligence mixed with active fraud. His personal assistant, fired 6 months ago for asking about discrepancies, had kept copies of everything. She found us through Patricia's network, brought bankers' boxes of evidence to our storage unit at 3 a.m., crying with relief that someone finally cared. Rebecca's weakness was her image. Her entire identity was built on being a powerful woman in finance, a mentor, a feminist icon. She gave speeches at women's conferences about lifting as we climb. I had recordings of her systematically destroying every female employee who showed promise. Emails where she used words like too ambitious and not culturally aligned. Corporate speak for threat to my position. Her husband's political career depended on her reputation. We had enough to destroy both. Derek was almost too easy. Cocaine addiction, prostitutes on the company card labeled as client entertainment, a DUI he'd paid a cop to bury. But the crown jewel was his side hustle, selling insider information to a competitor. Yuan Enterprises. He thought he was smart using crypto, meeting contacts in strip clubs where the music was too loud for recording. He didn't know that one of those strippers was Maria's cousin, who'd been recording everything on her phone for months, waiting for the right buyer for the information. We deployed technology like a weapon. Automated social media accounts that looked years old, carefully cultivated with normal posts, suddenly started sharing questions about Stratton's financials. Reddit threads appeared analyzing public filings, finding discrepancies. Twitter accounts tagged financial regulators with specific document numbers. All untraceable. All perfectly legal public information. All designed to create a crescendo of scrutiny. We're not whistleblowers, I explained to our team. We're conductors. We're just helping the truth find its rhythm. The media strategy was surgical. Aisha at the Wall Street Journal had the exclusive on the financial crimes. But we'd also lined up Bloomberg for the international money laundering, the New York Times for the political corruption, and ProPublica for the systematic discrimination. 4 major stories, 4 different angles, all dropping within hours of each other. A media blitzkrieg they couldn't possibly contain. We fed different evidence to different regulatory bodies. The SEC got the securities fraud. The FBI got the money laundering. The Department of Labor got the pension theft. The EEOC got the discrimination evidence. Each agency would want their piece, creating a feeding frenzy of investigations. But the masterstroke was the timing. We'd learned Stratton was about to announce a merger with Crimson Capital, a $3.2 billion deal that would make all 3 of them incredibly wealthy. The announcement was scheduled for a Monday morning, meant to boost stock prices and secure their golden parachutes. We scheduled our revelation for 6 a.m. that same Monday. Just as international markets opened, just as their PR teams would be focused on the merger, just as they'd be most vulnerable. Lila had found their internal communications system, the one they used for sensitive discussions they didn't want on company servers. Not hacking. Derek had stupidly used his personal email as a recovery account, and his password was his Ferrari's license plate. We could see their real-time panic as our planted seeds began to sprout across social media over the weekend. "Someone's digging into the Morrison account," Rebecca messaged Sunday night. "Handle it," Victor replied. "We announce tomorrow. Nothing can interfere." "It's contained," Derek lied, not knowing we had screenshots of him trying to move money from the Cayman accounts, only to find them frozen by a regulatory hold Jimmy had triggered through an anonymous tip to FinCEN. Sunday night. I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Everything was in place. The journalists were ready. The regulators were alerted. The evidence was distributed across multiple channels, impossible to suppress entirely. I stood at my motel window, looking at the city lights, thinking about my father dying in those Ohio mills, my mother's permanently bruised knees, the girl I'd been who'd believed hard work was enough. "You'll never make it," they'd said. In 6 hours, they'd learn what making it really meant. It wasn't about climbing their ladder or playing their game. It was about pulling the ladder down entirely. It was about changing the game's rules while they were still playing. My phone buzzed, a message from Aisha. "Legal cleared everything. We go live at 6:01 a.m. Are you ready?" I typed back, "I've been ready since the day they decided I'd never make it." The trap was set, every escape route blocked, every contingency planned for, every lie they might tell already countered with documented truth. Tomorrow. Victor Hale would wake up to federal agents at his door. Tomorrow. Rebecca Stanton would watch her husband's political career implode on live television. Tomorrow. Derek Cole would discover what happened when you thought you were untouchable. Tomorrow. They'd all learn that "you'll never make it" was the best motivation they could have given me. Monday, 6:01 a.m. The first domino fell with a gentle ping on my phone. Aisha's article was live. Exclusive. Inside Stratton Dynamics Decade of Fraud. Within minutes, Bloomberg followed. Then The Times. Then ProPublica. The storage unit erupted in controlled chaos as we monitored everything on Jimmy's screens. By 6:15, Stratton's pre-market trading was halted. By 6:30, the Stratton scandal was trending worldwide. By 6:45, the first news vans appeared outside their headquarters. I watched it all from a coffee shop across from their building. The same one where I used to buy my morning latte with corporate card privilege I thought meant I'd made it. Now I nursed a black coffee paid in cash, invisible, among the morning crowd, watching their empire crumble in real time. Victor arrived at 7 a.m. in his Bentley, still oblivious. He strutted past the reporters, waving them off with practiced arrogance. "No comment on baseless allegations," he declared, that CEO smile still intact. He didn't know that his offshore accounts had been frozen at midnight, that the FBI was already inside with a warrant, that his own board was meeting in an emergency session to distance themselves. The first crack in his composure came at 7:23 a.m. I knew because Derek posted it, a blurry video meant for his close friends that immediately went viral. Victor screaming at his assistant, throwing his phone against the wall, his face purple with rage as FBI agents carried boxes from his office. "Find who did this," he roared. "I'll destroy them." Rebecca's downfall was more elegant, befitting her carefully curated image. She tried to get ahead of it, posting a statement about irregularities she was just learning about and her commitment to full cooperation. But then the recordings dropped, her voice clear and cruel, explaining to a female subordinate why she'd never be partner material because of her unfortunate background. The feminist foundation she chaired denounced her within hours. Her husband's campaign manager announced his withdrawal from the race by lunch. Derek's end was the most pathetic. He tried to run, actually physically run. Security cameras caught him sprinting through the parking garage, duffel bag in hand, trying to reach his Ferrari. The FBI agents didn't even hurry. They walked calmly behind him as he fumbled with his keys, hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. The bag fell open, cash spilling across concrete, the kind of scene that makes perfect news footage. They arrested him right there, next to the car he'd bought with stolen money, reading him his rights as he sobbed about how it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Our leaked emails started hitting social media by noon. The worst ones, the most damning, carefully selected for maximum impact. Victor referring to clients as sheep to be sheared. Rebecca joking about keeping the diversity hires in their place. Derek's detailed descriptions of his money laundering process, complete with emoji reactions from his accomplices. The stock price fell 67% before trading was halted again. The merger with Crimson Capital was dead. They'd released a statement distancing themselves before most people had finished their morning coffee. Clients were demanding their funds. Employees were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Their own leaked messages trying to claim ignorance, throwing their leaders under any available bus. By 2 p.m., the perp walks began. Victor first, hands cuffed behind his back. That silver hair disheveled, his Armani suit wrinkled. He tried to keep his head high, but the photographers caught the moment his facade cracked. Eyes wide with the realization that his money, his connections, his privilege couldn't save him. Rebecca was arrested at her Pilates studio. She tried to maintain normalcy, perhaps thinking it would all blow over. The images of her in designer workout wear being led to a squad car became instantly memeable. Someone brilliant set it to bad blood on TikTok. It had 3 million views within an hour. Derek didn't get a perp walk. He'd already flipped, trying to save himself by testifying against the others. But we'd anticipated that too. His deal fell apart when prosecutors received our evidence of his personal crimes, the ones Victor and Rebecca didn't know about. The statutory rape allegation from 5 years ago, covered up with hush money. He went from potential witness to primary defendant in 3 hours. They're saying it was an inside job, Maria reported, monitoring their internal communications through the channels we still had access to. They think it was a current employee. I almost laughed. They still couldn't imagine that the nobody they'd destroyed had orchestrated their downfall. Even now, facing federal charges, watching their lives implode on every screen in America, they couldn't believe someone like me was capable of this. The afternoon brought congressional subpoenas. Senator Warren tweeted about corporate accountability. The Attorney General announced a task force. Stratton's crimes had become political currency, everyone rushing to denounce them, to distance themselves, to claim they'd always suspected something was wrong. By market close, Stratton Dynamics had lost 94% of its value. The board announced bankruptcy proceedings. Hundreds of employees learned their jobs were gone, their stock options worthless, their futures destroyed by the same 3 people who'd preached about corporate family and shared success. I felt bad for the innocents caught in the collapse, but I'd made provisions. Our evidence carefully excluded anyone below senior management, made clear who the real criminals were. The SEC would go after the big fish. The employees would be witnesses, not defendants. As the sun set on the worst day in Stratton's history, I sat in that same coffee shop, watching the news on my phone. Every channel led with the story. Every headline bore their names. Every analyst wondered how they'd hidden it for so long. "You'll never make it," they'd said. I looked at my reflection in the window, thinner than a year ago, harder, carrying scars that would never fully heal, but also alive in a way I'd never been when I was trying to make it in their world. Tomorrow would bring more revelations. We had weeks of evidence still to release, time to counter every legal maneuver, every PR attempt, every lie they might tell. But tonight was for savoring the first taste of justice. My phone buzzed, a message from Patricia. "Watching the news. Thank you." Then Keisha. "They'll never recover from this." Then Lila. "We did it." No. I thought, looking one last time at the dark tower that had once been Stratton Dynamics. I did it, and this was just the beginning. Tuesday morning brought the avalanche. The FBI raids expanded beyond Stratton's headquarters, Victor's mansion in Shaker Heights, Rebecca's brownstone in Columbus, Derek's waterfront condo. News helicopters circled like vultures, broadcasting live as agents carried out boxes, computers, even the art collection Victor had bought with embezzled funds. I released the second wave at precisely 10 a.m. Emails showing their attempts to cover up crimes dated just weeks ago. Victor instructing IT to wipe servers. Rebecca creating false documentation. Derek trying to frame me for the missing Morrison funds. Fresh crimes, committed even as they were under investigation. Their lawyers' phones wouldn't stop ringing. The congressional hearing was scheduled for Thursday. But Wednesday brought an unexpected gift. Whistleblowers emerging from everywhere. Former employees who'd been too scared before now felt safe to speak. The floodgates had opened. Michael Vance, former CFO, revealed he'd been keeping his own records for years, afraid of being scapegoated. Jennifer Wu from accounting had documented every fraudulent transaction she'd been forced to process. Even Victor's personal driver came forward with recordings of backseat conversations about hiding money offshore. Our storage unit command center was electric with activity. Every revelation was cross-referenced with our evidence, verified, then strategically leaked to maintain momentum. Jimmy had written algorithms to track the social media impact in real time. The numbers were staggering, millions of people watching justice unfold. Wednesday night. Derek cracked completely. His lawyer announced he'd attempt suicide in custody, pills he'd hidden in his designer shoes. He survived, barely, and was placed on psychiatric hold. The photo of him being wheeled into the hospital, restrained and sedated, was nothing like the cocky executive who'd stolen my work. Thursday's congressional hearing was theater at its finest. Victor in his orange jumpsuit, trying to invoke the Fifth Amendment to every question. Rebecca crying perfectly timed tears, claiming she was a victim too. Until Senator Warren presented her own emails mocking the very women she now claimed sisterhood with. The gallery erupted. Rebecca's face went from practiced sorrow to naked fury in seconds. The mask finally off completely. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Crimson Capital, furious about their failed merger, had done their own investigation. They released everything, including recordings of Victor promising them he could handle any regulatory issues because he had judges and prosecutors in his pocket. Names, dates, amounts. The corruption went deeper than even we'd known. Friday brought the indictments. Not just fraud and embezzlement, now racketeering, conspiracy. Attempted bribery of federal officials. RICO charges that meant potential life sentences. Their assets were frozen globally. Swiss banks suddenly discovered compliance standards. Cayman accounts mysteriously became transparent. Victor's wife filed for divorce that afternoon, claiming she'd been deceived. Rebecca's husband did the same, taking their children, releasing a statement about protecting them from their mother's crimes. Derek's family had disowned him months ago, when the cocaine addiction became public. The weekend was for secondary explosions. Art dealers realizing their purchases were made with stolen funds, demanding returns. Country clubs revoking memberships. Harvard Business School discussing removing Derek from their alumni rolls. Every institution they'd used to validate their superiority was cutting ties, erasing them from respectable history. Monday, exactly 1 week after the first article. The final phase began. Civil lawsuits from every direction. Clients suing for stolen funds. Employees suing for hostile work environment. Shareholders suing for securities fraud. The Forgotten had made sure every victim knew their rights, had connected them with attorneys working on contingency. Patricia Kimura filed the largest suit, $50 million for discrimination, retaliation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her NDA was void now that criminal activity had been proven. She walked into court with her head high, the woman they'd silenced finally able to speak. I watched from the gallery as each of them was arraigned on additional charges. Victor had aged a decade in a week. His silver hair now gray. His tan faded to prison pallor. Rebecca had stopped pretending, her face set in permanent hatred, glaring at everyone like they'd betrayed her. Derek wasn't even present, still in psychiatric hold, his lawyers arguing he was incompetent to stand trial. The prosecutor read the charges, each one a nail in their coffins: money laundering, wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion. The list went on for 20 minutes. When she finished, the judge denied bail. Flight risks, all of them. As they were led away, Victor's eyes swept the gallery and found mine. For a moment, recognition flickered. Not of my face, I was too transformed, too hardened. But something in my eyes, perhaps. The satisfaction I couldn't quite hide. His mouth opened, then closed. He knew, in that instant, that someone he'd dismissed as nothing had engineered his destruction. That evening, Stratton Dynamics was formally dissolved. The building would be sold to pay creditors. The logo was already being removed from the lobby. Employees were given 1 day to collect personal items. The empire that had seemed so permanent, so untouchable, had lasted exactly 1 week after we pulled the trigger. The New York Times ran a profile of the scandal, calling it the most comprehensive corporate takedown in modern history. They speculated about the source, the mysterious insider who'd orchestrated it all. Some thought it was a foreign government. Others suspected a competitor. No one imagined it was a discarded diversity hire living in a motel, fueled by instant coffee and righteous fury. My phone rang. Aisha, the journalist. "There's going to be a book," she said. "Movie rights are already being bid on. This is the story of the decade." "Tell the story," I said. "But leave me out of it. You could be famous. Rich. Everything you wanted." I looked around the empty motel room, at the air mattress and hot plate that had been my life for months. Everything I'd wanted had been an illusion, a trap, a lie sold to desperate people from dying towns. "They said I'd never make it," I told her. They were right. I made something better instead. "What's that?" "A world without them in it." The call ended. Tomorrow. I'd leave this city, maybe go back to Ohio, maybe somewhere else entirely. The forgotten would disperse, our work complete. We'd taken down titans using nothing but truth and patience and the fury of the dismissed. Victor Hale would die in prison 20 years into his sentence. Rebecca Stanton would serve 18 years, emerging broke and forgotten. Derek Cole would spend a decade in psychiatric facilities, then fade into obscurity. And I would disappear, becoming nobody again. But a nobody who'd proven that making it wasn't about joining them, it was about ending them. 5 years later, I stood in the same coffee shop across from what used to be Stratton Dynamics. The building had been converted into affordable housing and a community health center. Where Victor's office once towered over the city, there was now a children's daycare. Poetic justice has a sense of humor. The barista, a young woman with bright eyes and big dreams, didn't recognize me. Why would she? I looked nothing like the desperate woman who'd sat here watching an empire fall. I'd gained back the weight. The hardness had softened into something more like wisdom. The anger had transformed into something more useful. Purpose? I ran a nonprofit now, back in Youngstown. We helped women from Rust Belt towns get education, real training, real opportunities. Not the false promise of corporate America, but sustainable paths to stability. We'd helped 300 women so far. Each one a small revolution against the system that had tried to crush us all. Patricia Kimura served on our board. She'd won her lawsuit, used the money to start a legal fund for discrimination victims. Maria Rodriguez ran our international program. Keisha Williams handled our political advocacy. The forgotten had become the unforgettable, turning our pain into power for others. Jimmy Tran had sold his story to Netflix. Changed the names, of course. Made himself the hero, which was fine. He'd earned it. He used the money to start a cybersecurity firm that specialized in protecting whistleblowers, modern-day Robin Hood with a laptop instead of a bow. The news played on the coffee shop TV. Another corporate scandal, another CEO in handcuffs. The reporter mentioned Stratton Dynamics as a cautionary tale, how their downfall had led to new regulations, stronger oversight, the Stratton rules, they called them. Victor would have hated his name being attached to reforms. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Saw another company got caught stealing. Reminds me of those people who hurt you. Karma really works, doesn't it?" She never knew it wasn't karma. It was me. I'd never told anyone the full truth, not even the other forgotten. They knew their parts, but not the whole symphony. The FBI had quietly closed their investigation into the source of the leaks after determining no laws had been broken. Everything we'd done had been legal, just barely, carefully, deliberately legal. The truth, it turns out, isn't a crime. Sometimes I Googled them, my old tormentors. Victor had died 3 years into his sentence. Heart attack in his cell, alone. No one to call for help. His obituary was 3 lines in the local paper. His wife had remarried, changed her name, moved to Europe. His children didn't attend the funeral. Rebecca was still in minimum security, teaching yoga to other inmates. Her husband had full custody of their kids. Her feminist foundation had been disbanded, its funds redistributed to actual women's charities. Someone had sent me a photo of her from inside, gray roots, no makeup, the same dead eyes she'd hidden behind designer glasses. Derek was the saddest. Released after psychiatric treatment. He lived in a halfway house in Detroit. No money, no friends, no future. He worked at a car wash, the kind where executives like he used to be would tip him to clean their luxury cars. Someone had filmed him once, posted it online with the caption, "How the mighty have fallen." I didn't watch it. There was no satisfaction in his emptiness. The barista called out an order. "Americano for Morgan." I smiled at the coincidence, watched a young black woman collect her coffee, heading to what looked like a job interview, portfolio under her arm, hope in her stride. She had no idea that this building had once been a monument to everything trying to stop her. "You'll never make it," they'd told me in this very space. I looked at my reflection in the window one last time. The girl from Youngstown was gone. The desperate woman seeking revenge was gone too. What remained was someone who'd learned the most important lesson of all. The American dream they sold us was a lie. But that didn't mean we couldn't build our own. I left the coffee shop and never looked back at that building again. There were other towers to topple, other victims to empower, other systems to dismantle. But those were battles for tomorrow. Today, I had a plane to catch. A speaking engagement at a women's college in Ohio. Topic: Redefining Success in Corporate America. They had no idea their speaker was the architect of the most devastating corporate takedown in history. They just knew I was someone who'd survived the system and lived to tell about it. The invitation had asked for my bio. I'd written simply, "Alyssa Morgan grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. She worked briefly in finance. Now she helps others find better paths. She made it, just not the way anyone expected." As my taxi pulled away, I thought about their motto one last time. "You'll never make it." They were wrong about the first part, but they were right that I'd never make it their way. I'd made my own way instead. And that made all the difference. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Alyssa's position? Have you ever faced your own "you'll never make it" moment? Let's discuss in the comments below.